In 1977, civil war broke out in Mozambique. For 15 years, soldiers on both sides funded their campaigns by killing elephants for ivory. By the time it ended, roughly 90% of the elephants in Gorongosa National Park were gone. Imagine living long enough to watch evolution happen. Every year, the ones around you with the biggest, most valuable tusks disappear first. You don't know why. You just notice the herd looks a little different each season. By the time your daughters are born, something has changed that no elephant alive could have planned. An entire generation of females is being born without tusks at all. A trait that used to be a rare accident, now showing up in half of the population.
That's not a species that got smaller. That's a species that got redesigned in about one elephant lifetime by us. Evolution is supposed to be one of the slowest processes on Earth, something measured in thousands, even millions of years. So here's the question worth sitting with. How did this happen in 15? Half the survivors, no tusks. Let that sit for a second. Part 1. What actually changed? Scientists studying Gorongosa survivors wanted to know, was this random, or did the war do something specific to animal DNA?
They found a stretch of DNA on the X chromosome that looked different in tuskless females, tangled up with genes tied to tooth formation, which raised an odd follow-up question. If this mutation has probably existed for generations, why was it always so rare? The scientists found something almost nobody expected. This mutation appears to be lethal to males before birth. A female who inherits it survives fine, just without tusks. A male who inherits it doesn't survive to be born at all. Which means this trait could only ever spread through females, and normally that kept it rare enough not to matter. Then, poachers started removing the biggest tusks first. Overnight, in evolutionary terms, the trait that used to be a dead end became a survival ticket. Tuskless females were roughly 5 times more likely to live through the war. Hunters thought they were removing animals. In reality, they were deciding which elephants would become the next generation. That's natural selection. It's just not natural anymore. We're the pressure doing the selecting.
Most people imagine evolution as waiting around for the right mutation to show up. But new mutations arise in every generation, quietly, all the time. What actually takes thousands of years is deciding which mutations survive. That's selection. And the war didn't speed up mutation. Tuskless elephants had always existed in small numbers. What the war sped up was selection. And that's the lever we turn out to be extremely good at pulling. But here's what's strange. Evolution is supposed to take thousands of years. A war took 15. So the real question isn't whether we can do this, it's how far this actually goes. Does it take something as extreme as a war? Or can it happen by accident, through something as ordinary as a hunting license?
Part 2. It doesn't even take a war.
At Ram Mountain, Alberta, researchers have tracked bighorn sheep for over 40 years. The hunting rule there sounds responsible. Only rams whose horns reach a certain size can be taken. Hunters believed they were harvesting a few impressive trophies each season. What they were actually doing was deleting future fathers. Because the fastest growing rams hit that size young, years before they'd naturally reach peak breeding age. The best genetics in the population kept getting removed before they were ever passed on. Over 4 decades, average horn size dropped more than 20%. And in this specific population, researchers calculated that roughly 9% of that decline was a direct, heritable response to hunting, not just harder environments. Then the detail that should stop you. Female horns shrank too. 2 to 3 centimeters over 40 years. Nobody was hunting the females. Horn size is so tightly linked between the sexes in bighorn sheep that editing one silently edited the other. 2 completely different situations, a war
and a hunting regulation nobody thought was harmful, and the same outcome. Humans acting as a genetic filter, faster than evolution usually moves on its own. But even 40 years is still a long time if your biggest threat is waiting at the next intersection. Which leads to the real twist in this story. Everything so far has needed the same thing: generations. But what happens to a species that doesn't have generations to spare? What happens when the threat isn't a war 15 years long, but a car that could kill you tomorrow morning? Genes can't move that fast. So what does? In Sendai, Japan, researchers noticed something that didn't make sense. Carrion crows were placing walnuts on busy roads. Not unusual. Birds drop food onto hard surfaces all the time. What was strange was that the crows weren't retrieving them right away. They waited, sometimes for minutes, as if they were waiting for something. They were. A traffic light. The crows had learned to place walnuts exactly where car tires would crack them, then wait for the pedestrian signal to turn green before walking out, alongside actual human pedestrians, to collect the cracked kernels inside a safety window that was built for us, not them.
No gene did that. There's no strand of crow DNA for understand a traffic signal. One crow, in one lifetime, worked out a rule of a system we built. And here's the detail that turns this from a clever trick into something bigger. Researchers watched younger crows copy individuals that already knew the technique. The behavior wasn't spreading through DNA, it was spreading through culture, the same way traditions spread through human communities. Information no longer had to wait for reproduction. It could spread through imitation instead. And imitation can move in a single season, not a single lifetime of natural selection.
Crows and magpies have taken this further still. Some have been recorded ripping metal anti-bird spikes, hardware installed specifically to keep them away, off buildings, weaving the spikes into their own nests as armor against predators. We build a deterrent. They dismantle it and rebuild it as a fortress wall. Which raises the real question this whole documentary has been circling. If culture can do in one season what genetics takes generations to do, is learning becoming a form of evolution? When learning becomes life or death, coyotes show exactly how high those stakes can get. In Edmonton, Alberta, researchers compared coyotes that survived in the city to those that didn't. The survivors had shifted their road crossings to around 11 p.m. when traffic was lightest. The ones that got hit by cars had kept crossing at dawn and dusk, exactly peak commute hours. Every generation, the city quietly removes the careless coyotes. The careful ones survive long enough to raise pups and to pass the lesson on, den to den, before those pups ever face traffic themselves. Every pup born in that den grows up with something more valuable than a gene: experience. Genes didn't have time to catch up. Learning became the inherit.
Which brings us to the strangest place this pattern shows up at all. Because it turns out, learning doesn't just replace evolution. Sometimes it feeds back into it. Part 5. When learning feeds back into evolution. City noise sits mostly below 3 kHz, almost exactly the range most birds evolved to sing in. Urban birds face a cruel choice: sing at their natural pitch, and the noise swallows the sound, unheard by any female. Sing higher to cut through the noise, and in some species, that higher pitch turns out to be less attractive to females in the first place. Either way, something we built has quietly gotten between these animals and finding a mate. In dark-eyed juncos, researchers found something even stranger. When they raised city-descended juncos in quiet, controlled conditions, far from any urban noise, those birds still sang notably higher than their mountain counterparts. That's not a habit picked up from a noisy environment. The birds never heard the noise. The more careful explanation is this: somewhere along the way, natural selection favored birds whose inherited songs already happened to fit the city better, and that inherited advantage stuck, even in silence. Which means the loop closes. Genes forced a change in survival odds. behavior helped some animals outrun that change entirely. And in at least one species, over generations, natural selection favored birds whose inherited traits already fit the New World better. For 4 billion years, evolution answered to volcanoes, ice ages, asteroid impacts, predators, disease, chance. Today, one species has joined that list: us. It turns out the answer isn't that humans stopped evolution or stood outside of it, watching. It's that we became one of its strongest selective forces, not over millions of years, not even over thousands, sometimes within a single lifetime.